Okay, little update on the VR6 swap. Have the block pretty much disassembled, cleaned and prepped. I'll wipe it down with some wax and grease. Everything's a mess at the moment. They're going to paint the block and reseal all the timing covers, leaking oil like crazy. So that stuff will be cleaned up. And my boy hasn't decided exactly on a paint scheme, you know, if we're going to leave the valve cover aluminum or paint it a certain color along with the intake manifold. So once again, there's all the stuff here that still needs to be cleaned up and used. And then I can't remember if I've shown some of the other stuff that I've collected so far, but there's a front sway bar that I have not been able to use on that car because of that header, and supposedly with this downpipe able to use the sway bar. So we've got some new brackets here, fuel pump. Actually, that fuel pump is off of that old 85 Scirocco right there, the filter. And then the front bar, which goes across the front of the frame rails and hooks it to the front snub mount. Keeps the front core support from twisting. And all the seals for the head, main seal, the different seals for taking parts off on the block, like the oil cooler, oil filter. The mounts, the delete for the emission stuff, throttle cable, tack, flywheel bolts, and then the axles in there. And then I've got coming the ECU, which has been tuned to delete this stuff, and it's been tuned, you know, for mild upgrades. And it's been tuned to delete the anti-theft. And then the harness has been stripped, so it should just be a plug and play harness. Hook it up to power and bump the starter and let her rip with some fuel hooked up to it and all that. And then the radiator, which I ordered part of this kit, a little shorty radiator, which is going to tuck in there. You know, because if you don't got room up front, I bought a custom radiator for this thing, but look what I had to do to it. I had to make a custom cap to fit it and tuck it up underneath there. So this other one is a shortened radiator, which tucks up underneath the factory core support. And what else do I got going on with this thing? Pretty much everything is on the way, ready to roll. So as soon as we get the block cleaned up, do a little more cleaning on those parts and pieces, and get the clutch cleaned up, transmission cleaned up, bolt that stuff on there. You know, it's ready for the install before you know it. Hopefully this should be a quick little project. Almost got everything cleaned up. There's the messy intake manifold. A couple other odds and ends. That's about it. Got the side covers, timing covers cleaned up. Valve cover painted, same color as the body. And all these things that bolt onto the motor, all cleaned up. I'm going to paint the starter yet, get that done. And yeah, that stuff's pretty much done and ready. What a mess got in here. There's all the pieces, got all the seals for the side covers, all that. There's the painted block waiting to be reassembled. Got the wiring back. So that's a stripped down harness. Pretty much a plug and play situation where you just wire up the fuel pump, the fan. It's got an OBD2 port. Put some power to it, some ground to it. These all hook up to the sensors on the motor. And then both ends of that will plug into the ECU. Now that ECU has been supposedly tuned. Cost me a lot of money to get that thing tuned to delete all this crap so that it doesn't throw codes, and I don't know what they do to it, but there's not much to do to it other than maybe just advance the timing a touch and maybe a little straighten out the fuel curve a tad. And then there's the shorty radiator, which tucks in there. All this stuff is from S&P Automotive. So finally got everything, and then he sent me the front snub mount finally, which goes with the rest of these mounts. Front, motor side, transmission side. And even though I seen one, he makes one on his video, but he says you don't need a mount for the rear. I know on this thing I needed a mount for the rear. I had to make one. And if that's what I gotta do for the blue car, then that's what I gotta do for the blue car. And then one more thing. Transmission. Cleaned up. Look at that. Ooh, baby. So now it's prepped out and ready for some paint. Make it look really good. Prepped out, ready for some paint. And then I still got to change these axle stubs. They're smaller for those axles for some reason. Whatever. Don't question that stuff. We just go with the flow. I have some from another transmission, so it ain't gonna be that big a deal. I hope. Ain't gonna be that big a deal to swap those out. So now I gotta get set up and I'm gonna paint that thing. And then just got a couple more parts to clean up and paint. This goes on the top of the transmission. Clean those up and paint them. And the intake manifold, that'll get painted. And then the starter. And then the starter. This stuff looks pretty good, but just leave that aluminum. Painted those pulleys already. Cool. Almost done, almost ready. Almost ready to get this place cleaned up. I don't know if I mentioned, but they were bragging about that downpipe. You could use the factory front sway bar. And I haven't had that front sway bar on there forever. Since they're using that 8-valve header on the 1.8 liter. It won't fit. So that will be exciting if I could finally get this bar to be hooked up on the front. And then I'm sure I saved these brackets, but I don't want to look for them. So I just looked on eBay. Got me some new brackets. So anyway, that thing's ready to bolt on. Everything's ready to bolt on. Pretty soon this is going to be like a Saturday hot rod TV show, just bolting on new parts. And there is a block of aluminum. It looks a bit bright, looks a bit illuminating, kind of fake-ish, but it'll look good in the car. I've done them like this before. When you mask off all the bolts and all the hardware. And, you know, I'll have the green flange down here. These stub ends will be black. Bolts will be clean. You know, there'll be black parts on there. Contrast unit, the slave cylinder. And the linkage for the shifting and stuff like that. It looks pretty good. When it's all bright and clean like that. It sure is nice grabbing a hold of it and working on it when it's brand new clean like that. Love it. So yeah, one more piece of the puzzle.